In this tutorial, I'm going to be going over how to make a very simple vector mockup of an Apple iPhone, but of course this will apply to pretty much anything that you want to mock up, so an Android phone, or even things like an iPad or other tablet. All these principles will fully apply to those. Just use the image of the device that you want to mock up instead of the iPhone image, and then you should be good to go. So on the left and the right here are both two finished examples of what I'm going to be showing you how to do. So this one on the left here is just a very simple vector mockup, and the one on the right, I went ahead and added in this screen image so that it looks a little bit more realistic, or shows you how you can go in there and add your own screens to present as you see fit. So also something to note here, you're going to want Adobe Illustrator CC or newer, because there's a really cool rounded edge feature built into that version of Illustrator that'll just make this a million times easier. If you don't have that, you can alternatively use the rounded rectangle tool. So click and hold over the rectangle and then select the rounded rectangle tool instead of the rectangle tool when I'm using that. But I'm not going to be going over that in this tutorial because this is really focused on the Illustrator CC version. So I have a new document opened up right here that's blank, so that's where we're going to be starting. A couple things you're going to want to make sure you have opened up is you want to make sure you have window, and then you want to have layers right near the middle here opened up, because layers will just save you a bunch of time when you're working on this. And you also want window and then align opened up, which should bring up this align window. Whoops. That is right here on my screen. Align will just help you make sure everything is nice and centered. And then you're also going to want to find a couple images here. So I just pulled an image off the web that we're going to be drawing over of an Apple iPhone 6 Plus. I believe that's what this is, but you can find whatever device it is you want to mock up. Since we're not going to be using this image in any way in the final version, I don't think it matters where you pull it from, but of course don't use just some random image off of Google and then publish exactly that. You're going to want to redraw this so it's a bit more appropriate for what you're working on. So I'm just going to bring this stuff into my new document right here, including this screen image. So I'm just going to select both of these, hit Control X on a PC or Command X on a Mac, go into my new window and hit Control V on a PC or Command V on a Mac. If you're just bringing your image in here for the first time, you can either drag and drop your image right into Illustrator, which will allow it to just go in here and pop on the screen, or alternatively you can go to File and then Place sort of near the middle, which will ask you where the folder is, and just select the name of the image of your device that you're going to use, and then go ahead and bring that in here. So now that we have our device in here as well as the screen that we want to mock up, you don't need this screen. That's just a little step I want to show you how to do in the future. The first thing we're going to want to do here is go to the layers window, and then it should have just one layer called layer 1 that'll have all the different images we brought in here. If I toggle this on and off by clicking the eyeball, you can go ahead and see that pretty easily here. I actually like to lock this layer so I don't accidentally move this image around at all, since I just want to keep it behind what I'm drawing on because I'm basically drawing over it. So just to the right of the eyeball, click in the blank box and a little lock will appear, meaning that this layer is no longer editable. So that makes sure you just can't move stuff around accidentally. And you can also double click where it says layer 1 and then type in something like image or photo, something like that, just so you know what is on this layer. Even though you might know what's on this layer very easily, it's nice for other people to have access to a nicely named bunch of layers if they ever use the file after you. And if you didn't have your layers window or you can't find it, just make sure once again you went to window and then layers sort of near the middle here to have that opened up. So now I'm going to hit on this little button in the layers window that says create a new layer. It looks sort of like a page turning, so just click that once and that'll bring up a new layer right here, which is where we're going to be drawing this iPhone shape. So let's just name this, let's say outline, since that's what I'm going to be drawing on this particular thing. I'm not going to be drawing the back, I'll just be focusing on the front here. So next we want to select the rectangle tool, which is right here on the toolbar. It looks like a rectangle, which kind of makes sense. And also you can hit M on your keyboard to go ahead and select that. And I'm also going to very quickly hit D on my keyboard to bring the color of the fill on the stroke to have a black stroke and then a white fill. And I'm actually going to click on the white fill right here and then go down to this button just below it that says none. It looks like a white box with a red line going through it, as I actually don't want a fill on this. And then the stroke right here, if you click that and bring that in the front, it'll look like a square with a square missing out of the middle right here. You can double click on that and make the fill a different color than black if you want to. It really doesn't matter what color you make the outlines here. It's up to you how you want to make your mock-up look. And if I didn't say it before, make sure you went to window and then stroke, kind of near the bottom here and have that opened up because we are going to want to change the stroke of this particular outline that we're making. So I'm going to just go over this image right here and draw a roughly equivalent sized rectangle around the edges of this iPhone. And then you can just zoom in by hitting Control plus or Command plus on a Mac. Or if you want to zoom out, you can hit Control minus or Command minus. So you can decide how closely you want these edges to match this iPhone right here. I think this is perfectly fine for this tutorial. And then with the selection tool selected, which is the black arrow or V on your keyboard, just highlight over this rectangle that you drew. And in the corner edges right here, if you're using the proper version of Adobe Illustrator Creative Cloud, you're going to see two little circles in any one of the 4 different corners of this rectangle that you just want to click, hold, and then drag inward until it matches approximately the radius of this iPhone right here that we're recreating. So that's a really quick way to round the edges here, and it's why I said that Illustrator CC or newer is the easiest way by a pretty wide margin to make shapes like this. And then with this still selected with that selection tool, I'm just going to increase the stroke weight a little bit here until I think it looks a little bit more appropriate for our device. So the next steps right here should be pretty fast. First, I'm going to recreate this little thing right here, which I believe is the speaker. So once again, I'm going to hit M on my keyboard so that the rectangle tool is selected. I'm going to draw a little rectangle around this speaker, and in this case it looks like it has the stroke selected with no fill. So I'm going to hit Shift and then X to flip around the stroke and the fill. So just make sure you click on the stroke and hit none if you don't want to do that to remove the stroke, and then set the fill to a color like black by double clicking on it. Really easy to do that. Once again, I'm going to hit V on my keyboard to bring up that black arrow or the selection tool. I'm going to zoom in a little bit closer here and just grab one of these little circles inside of it, just like we did for the outside corner edge, and just drag this all the way in until it becomes a perfect circle at the edges, and then let go. So we very quickly recreated that shape here. Next up, we have a few circles that we want to replicate. So I'm going to hit L on my keyboard to bring up the ellipse tool. Alternatively, if you just see the rectangle tool in your toolbar, click and hold, and then go down here near the middle to the ellipse tool and select that. And then bring your cursor while the ellipse tool is selected near the middle of this circle right here up at the top, and then just hold Alt on a PC or Option on a Mac, which will make the circle draw from the center point of your cursor, and also hold down Shift when you're doing this so it maintains a nice and perfect circle. If you don't, it might not be a perfect circle, and just kind of approximately draw a circle over that, and then you can go ahead and let go. And we're also going to do that for this circle at the bottom right here. So I'm just going to zoom out and go down to the little button down here at the bottom and draw a circle over this one. So I'm going to hit L on my keyboard to bring up that ellipse tool, hold down Alt on a PC or Option on a Mac, as well as Shift, and then try to match this somewhat closely. On this particular circle at the bottom, we actually want this to have a stroke without a fill. So once again, I'm going to hit Shift X to flop around my stroke and fill. So now I have a black stroke with no fill at all. Alternatively, click on the fill and then just hit this none button and then double click on your stroke and set it to be the appropriate color. At any time too, if you want to resize your circle, just move your selection tool, which is the black arrow, over to one of these 4 corners and then hold down Shift as you scale it in just a little bit. And you can also use your arrow keys on your keyboard when this is selected to nudge it left or right or up or down, or just click and hold on it and then drag it up into place as you see fit. I'll show you a really quick trick to make sure this is perfectly centered on our device in just a second here. So I'm going to highlight this, go back over to the stroke window and increase the weight just a little bit so it seems to be a little bit more approximately the right size in contrast with our device here. So next up, with the selection tool or the black arrow selected, I'm going to highlight everything that we just did and then go to the align window, which is right here on my screen. And if you don't have this open, just go to window and then align. It's near the very top. And there's a middle option on the top here under align objects while this is all still selected called horizontal align center. I'm just going to click this one time. In this case, it moved things just a tiny little bit, but it makes sure that all the different things here are perfectly aligned to our outline of our device. And under this align to in the lower right hand here, you just want to click and hold that and make sure it's set to align to selection. If it's aligned to artboard or key object, it might not align things down the perfect center of your outline drawing right here. So do be careful about that. And also make sure that you did lock the image behind this, because if you didn't, this might align to the center of that image instead of the center of this outline that we just created. So now we're actually very close to being done here. So I'm just going to zoom in by hitting Control plus on a PC or Command plus on a Mac. And we're going to quickly draw this little, I believe this is a front-facing camera right here. So I'm going to hit L on my keyboard for that ellipse tool. Make sure I'm clicked on the outline layer and not on the locked image layer. You can't draw on a layer that's locked. I'm going to go to the center of this camera right here, hold down Alt on a PC or Option on a Mac, so we draw this from the center of our selection point, then hold Shift as I draw this out, and try to make this roughly appropriate for the size of the camera right here. I might move this down to 2-point instead of 3-point. You can decide what size stroke you want. And also make sure when you're adjusting the stroke that it is highlighted. If you don't highlight it and you change the stroke, nothing's going to happen, which might make you wonder why nothing's happening. It's because it isn't selected. So I actually think this looks just fine for this. And once again, this one has a black stroke with no fill. To remove that fill, remember there's that button down here that says none to go ahead and remove that. So now all we have to do pretty much is just draw this screen on the center here. So I'm going to hit M on my keyboard to bring up that rectangle tool. Alternatively, we can go ahead and just highlight over the tool here and make sure that rectangle tool is selected just below the type tool that looks like a T. So just click and hold that and select the rectangle tool. And I'm just going to draw very quickly a rectangle that is about the size of the screen right here. I know this isn't going to be perfectly centered on my device, so I'm actually going to make sure once I'm done drawing this to highlight everything except this camera right here. So I'm going to click, hold, and drag with that selection tool or the black arrow so that this is all highlighted except the camera. Once again, go to the Align window. In the middle of the Align objects right here, there's that horizontal Align center. I'm just going to click that one time, so that'll perfectly align our screen, and everything else should align nicely with that, and the camera still looks like it is in place, so I think we're pretty good to go there. And I'm just going to quickly select this screen that we just set here and hit Shift X so that we have a black fill with no stroke. And I'm actually going to do another step here just to make this a little bit easier as we continue moving forward. So I'm going to click on this screen with the selection tool and hit Control X on a PC or Command X on a Mac, which will cut it. And then I'm going to hit this button on the Layers palette that is for create a new layer. It looks like a page turning. Now I'm going to name this layer by double clicking where it says layer 3 in my case to something like screen, since that is what I'm going to be placing on it. And then I'm going to hit Control F on a PC or Command F on a Mac to paste that screen in place. So now we have the screen on its own layer. And for this next step, you're going to want to make sure you have Smart Guides on. To turn on Smart Guides, hit Control U on a PC or Command U on a Mac. Smart Guides are just little notations, so as I highlight over this path right here, you can see a green line that's highlighting the path we're on, as well as some type that says path. If I go over an anchor point, it says anchor in small green text. If you already saw this, then you don't have to hit Control U or Command U, because hitting Control U on a PC or Command U on a Mac just toggles on and off Smart Guides. So if you already saw that, don't do anything. If you don't see that, just hit Control U or Command U and you should be good to go. Let's create another layer actually by hitting this Create a New Layer button, and this time we're going to call this Highlight, because we're just going to make a nice little highlight layer for the screen to make kind of a faux realistic effect, even though this is a somewhat line drawy looking iPhone mockup. So I'm going to hit P on my keyboard to bring up the pen tool. It's right here on the toolbar if you want to click it. It looks like an old ink pen. And since we have Smart Guides on, as I highlight over the anchor point on the upper right hand corner here, it says anchor. So I'm going to click that and then once again go down to the bottom here until it says anchor on the bottom right. I'm going to click once there, go to the bottom left where it says anchor, click once there, and now we're going to go all the way up to the top here until we get to the upper right hand anchor to close that path. So with this selected, this new triangular shape we just drew, I'm going to double click on that fill and turn it to be pure white right here so that this will eventually be the highlight of our screen. So I'm just going to click on that once again so that is still selected, and up at the top here, kind of near the middle of your screen, there's something called opacity. We can set this to be a much smaller value than 100, so you can just highlight over this and then type in something like, let's say 30% and hit enter. So this will make a highlighted effect on our screen. I might even make this something a bit smaller, like 20%. We can of course adjust this. Whoops, I put 2%. We can of course adjust this later on to look how we want it to look. If I go back to my original example here, it looks like it's set to 10%. So I'll just go ahead and make this 10% since that seems to be a pretty good look for this particular mockup. So now our base mockup is done, and if I turn off this layer at the bottom that says image, to hide that image, we have a pretty nice looking, very simplistic vector mockup made right here. So now I'm going to show you how to go in here and then add in an image mockup if you want to do that. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to lock every single one of these layers by just clicking on the right side of this little eyeball until a lock appears. So I'm going to lock the highlight and I'm going to lock the outline. I want to leave the screen unlocked, and in this case we're going to actually unlock this image layer with the iPhone mockup as well as the screen because we're going to be using that screen. I'm just going to drag this out of the way so it's not going to be in our way here. So with this image of the screen selected right here, I'm just going to hit Control X on a PC or Command X on a Mac to go ahead and cut it. I'm going to lock this image layer back up and then click on the screen layer, and I'm going to hit Control V on a PC or Command V on a Mac to go ahead and place it right here on this screen layer. And what I'm going to do is just bring it over the overall screen layer that we have right here until it pretty much fills this entire thing up. You might have to readjust your screen quite a bit. It will take a little bit of time to make sure things match up decently. I think it's better to have your screen be just a little bit too big than a little bit too small, but you do want to make things line up as best as you can. So now very quickly, to mask out this screen to the shape of the screen that we drew so that this is all perfectly aligned, what you're going to want to do is use that selection tool, click on the image that you placed over your screen, right click it, we're going to arrange and then send it to back because we want the clipping mask to be made from this black rectangle that we drew right here. So next up, with the selection tool still selected, just go ahead and drag over the upper left hand corner of the screen right here so that the black screen is selected but not the transparent highlight we made. And it is also selecting that image in the background that we have. So now both of these two things are selected. So all we have to do now is right click it and then hit Make Clipping Mask, which will clip this image to the shape of that square that we previously drew. So in this case, you can tell this image isn't perfectly sized, so it is cutting off a little bit on the bottom here. So make sure you size everything properly before you go in there and do that. But now we're pretty much done here and we have this mockup made, so I can go ahead and unlock my highlight layer right here by clicking on that lock icon, which goes ahead and unlocks that. If you want to, you can then lock your screen layer so you don't accidentally drag around your screen. So if I try to click on any of this stuff, I actually can't. I'm going to select this highlight layer we made, which is a transparent white, and go to the opacity slider by hitting this little arrow next to opacity and just dragging this up until the highlight looks roughly equivalent to how I want it to look. And now we're pretty much done here. We have a very simplistic vector mockup made up inside Adobe Illustrator. And I had actually forgotten to make these little buttons for the volume, for example, on the iPhone when I made this tutorial originally. So if my screen looks a little bit different now than it did just a second ago, I'm just redoing this after I completed the tutorial to show you how to draw these buttons very easily. So what we're going to want to do is go to the rectangle tool, which is right here on your toolbar. M is the keyboard shortcut. Make sure that's selected. Have your fill set to black and have no stroke. And if you already have your image of your device drawn, you could go ahead and just match that completely and just draw over it. In my case, I removed that from the back here, so I'm just going to kind of approximately draw a rectangle by clicking and holding until we get a shape that's about right for the size of this button here. I'm going to zoom in really quick by hitting Control plus on a PC or Command plus on a Mac, and then I can go ahead and click it with my selection tool, which is the black arrow. Go to one of these little circles here to round those edges and round those in a little bit, and then I can move this in a little bit more to make it look a little bit closer to this device right here. And then there's two buttons on the left hand side here, so I'm going to click on this once again, hold down Alt on a PC or Option on a Mac to duplicate it, drag it off to the left hand side here and let go where I think it's pretty much approximately correct to the buttons right here, and then click on it once more, hold down Alt as well as Shift so it stays on a perfect vertical plane until this looks pretty good, and then let go. So if I quickly remove the image in the back here, you can see that these buttons are now added in. If you think they look a little bit too apparent, you can just click on them, and you can hold Shift to click multiple items at once and then kind of nudge them in a little bit more if you want to, so they're not sticking out quite so far. So sorry about forgetting to do that in the actual tutorial, but now this has been added in, so now back to the original tutorial where you will see these buttons magically disappear. So the cool thing about these mockups is the mockup itself will be infinitely scalable, but do keep in mind the image that you bring into the mockup. If you are mocking up an actual image here and you're not drawing something inside Illustrator, that image will no longer be vector. So do keep that that in mind, but the actual mockup itself will be vector, so you can go ahead and scale these as big or as small as you want. But that's it for this tutorial. I do hope it was helpful. If you have any questions, feel free to ask in the comments section, and I will list all the shortcuts in the comments section as well if you have any particular questions about what shortcuts I was using as I was kind of going through them. Sometimes things move a little bit fast. But if you did find this helpful, please hit like and favorite, and if you want to see stuff like this every week, please subscribe. I do my best to keep new content just like this coming for illustrators and designers. Thank you so much for watching.